What's up, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Sit Down Shorts. This show is where we talk about gangsters that maybe you heard of, maybe you haven't heard of. If you want the gangsters you probably heard of, check out our podcast, The Sit Down, a mafia history podcast, wherever you get your podcast. New episodes out every Wednesday. Now, I recently put out a video on Jimmy Brown Fiala. It was well received, and I appreciate the listens. As always, if you enjoy the show, make sure you go hit the like button and subscribe. Now, today we're going to talk about another member of the Gambino crime family, a self-admitted member of the Gambino crime family. We'll get to that a little bit later. I'm going to talk today about Anthony Tony Pep Trentacosta. Now, Tony Pep is a name that you probably have heard if you know anything about the Gotti regime of the Gambino family. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to take a look at a couple of different members. We're going to start today with Tony Pep. Tony Pep actually has a pretty interesting life, frankly. He would be born in Ozone Park, Queens in 1939, and he was the son of first-generation Sicilian immigrants. They actually came from a town called Maranello, which is a commune just outside of Palermo. Tony Pep's family was from Sicily. Now, coming up, he would hang out in Ozone Park, kind of get the lay of the land, and start committing mob crimes. He was arrested multiple times for bookmaking and burglary and hijacking and different things of that nature. He started running in the same crews as John Gotti and Andrew Ruggiero, and eventually met Gotti in Ozone Park. Now, by 85, when Gotti takes over the Gambino crime family, he would bring in a couple different made members. Now, at that point, Tony Pep becomes a made member of the Gambino crime family. Now, Tony Pep was always known as an earner. Now, as we know in a mob family, there are different types. There are people that are killers. There are people that are earners. I talked about Jimmy Brown last week. Jimmy Brown was an earner, a big-time earner. He made millions in the garbage industry and other illicit activities. Now, Tony Pep was a very similar individual. Tony Pep was not known for being a killer or a leg breaker or an assaulter. He was a guy that made money. And one of the major schemes he was involved with was with an individual called Anthony Morelli. Morelli and Tony Pep were involved in a gas tax scheme similar to the one that Michael Franzese was involved in. Now, Tony Pep and his cohorts were making 3 to 4 cents every gallon of gas in the late 80s. Now, as we know, the feds are not going to put up very long with people surmising and making a ton of money through them. Interestingly enough, though, Morelli would be arrested. Tony Pep would not. At that point, Tony Pep sees the writing on the wall, and in the late 80s goes to boss John Gotti and says, hey, look, I want to expand operations. Now, a lot of Gambinos were heading down to Florida. Obviously, someone like Fat Andy Ruggiero, he headed down to Florida. But Tony Pep says, you know what? I want to go to Atlanta. He goes down to Atlanta, buys a home for him and his wife in the very posh Polo Fields, which is a community outside of Atlanta in a place called Cumming. And I'll tell you right now, beautiful properties in the Polo Fields, very high-end homes, $8, $9, $1 million as far as the going rate in that area. Now, Tony Pep was a moneymaker, and Gotti knew that by sending him down there, he could advance his reach. And Atlanta was a good area. There were plenty of nightclubs and topless bars and strip clubs. And Tony Pep fits right in. He buys clubs. He invests in a moving company, a storage company. He continues to run his real estate rackets. He was making a lot of money down in Atlanta. And it was a great idea because really when you look at the forefront of Cosa Nostra, there is no family that was never in Atlanta. Right. And look, there were no families in Atlanta really outside of a couple guys. And Tony Pep was smart enough to understand that by going down to Atlanta, he was insulated. He got to get away from the government and really continue to make his money. And that was the thing about Tony Pep. And that's one of the things about a lot of the guys in the Gambino family during the Gotti years. A lot of these guys were totally opposite of Gotti. Make money, not headlines. They were shrewd. They were smart. Anytime they thought a tinge of incorrectness was involved, they got out. There was also a point of conjecture made that at one point, Tony Pep was asked to get involved with the Gold Club, which was a strip club and ended up jamming up other mobsters. He was smart enough to not get involved with that. Now, the FBI really wanted Tony Pep. Okay, remember, he was never able to be brought to justice in the gas tax stuff that he was involved with Morelli. He skates down to Atlanta, but the government doesn't give up on Tony Pep. They have informants that are around Tony Pep. They're following him. They had viewed him multiple times, not only in New York, but in Florida, meeting with different gangsters in the family, including Peter Gotti, Nicky Carrazzo, other guys that were involved and close to Gotti. Now, again, like Jimmy Brown, who we've talked about, Tony Pep was very smart. He wasn't talking on the phone. He was running through emissaries. He was doing walk and talks. It's really hard when you're not committing violent crimes to get caught. Now, Tony Pep was committing crimes, but he was not going out and beating people up and killing people and ordering murders, okay? That was the thing Tony Pep was good at. A lot of these guys were smart in the fact that that's where you really get selling drugs, that kind of stuff. That's where you really get put on the radar. It's really hard to connect you to shit if you're just making money, right? You have to do a lot of heavy lifting to find people in that. Now, it was interesting because even Tony Pep would get hassled by the FBI. There was a story in the 90s when Tony Pep was down in Atlanta right before he went down to Florida. He was up in New York visiting for mob business likely, and he was in Little Italy. He went to Taormina's, and an FBI agent talked about they were in Taormina's eating lunch with wise guys in there as well. We've seen it, Sopranos, they're always eating lunch. That fucking FBI agent loved food. Who is it? Agent Harris. But yeah, the FBI was in Taormina's, and they're sitting there eating lunch, and who walks in? Tony Pep. He's dressed well, looks hair coiffed. Tony Pep, good-looking guy. Let's actually take a look at Tony Pep. But not a bad-looking guy, right? You know, kind of that got that Italian look to him. He's got the hair coiffed. He has that scowl on his face always. So he walks in, and the FBI agents, yell over, "Hey, Tony, how you doing?" He looks at them, who the hell are you guys? And the agent responds, "I'm the fucking guy that's going to arrest you soon." And, be it as it may, we'll get to what happens to Tony Pep here in just a little bit. Now, as I said, not only was Tony Pep down in Atlanta, but there were other members of the family that were in Florida, one of which was Fat Andy Ruggiano, who was down there kind of expanding territories, doing his thing. In 1999, Fat Andy Ruggiano would die. And there needed more representation in Florida. The leadership of the Gambinos goes to Tony Pep and says, "Look, we need you down in Florida as well. We want you to head up the crew that Fat Andy Ruggiano was running. We're going to put you in and install you as capo regime." So he also involves his territory down in Florida. And they actually work out of Sunny Isles Beach, which had a pizzeria called Beachside Mario's. Beachside Mario's was run by an individual called Freddie Massaro. Freddie Massaro was a member of the family. He was a guy that was an associate, a soldier. He worked out of Beachside Mario's, and they were running all sorts of different schemes. Now, this situation that would arise in the 90s, ultimately the late 90s, would end up proving very costly for Tony Pep. And this is where finally the FBI comes in and is able to figure things out. So the story would surround an individual, a woman called Jeanette Smith. Now, Jeanette Smith was from what many would say, was a beautiful woman. She was a stripper, though. And she worked at a club in that area. And as any stripper or dancer knows, they develop regulars. And one of the regulars she began to develop was an individual called Ariel Hernandez. Now, Hernandez was a former military man. He was a sniper in the military. He is a fan of hers, if you will. And he was telling his friends of his and other patrons that he was going to fuck this girl, da-da-da-da-da. And look, the difference between most strippers and most patrons is the patrons believe they can hook up with them because they're strippers. Now, most high-end strippers like Jeanette Smith she was making a ton of money. She did it as a business. It was not because she was in love with these people. It was a business. She was an actress, basically. Now, Mr. Hernandez starts to become infatuated with Smith. and develops, I guess, according to him, an interest in her. Now, she didn't have an interest in him, but whatever. Now, Hernandez, weirdly enough, was actually connected to Fred Massaro. Massaro was running shit out of the pizzeria and was kicking up to Tony Pep. Hernandez had a check kiting scheme. Okay, he was basically scamming businesses through fake bad checks. And according to affidavits, he was making up to 15 grand a week doing this. And he was kicking up to Tony Pep's crew and Freddie Massaro. At some point, there's a connection between Hernandez and the stripper. The stripper finds out about the check kiting thing and decides to start running her mouth about it. Now, there's a few different stories that present themselves, one of which was Hernandez was not getting what he wanted from Smith, so he killed her. Her body was discovered in 1999 in the Everglades. Now, there also is thought that the Gambino family, particularly Fred Massaro, found out about this, that she knew about it, and had her killed. Hernandez told the police that he was constructed by the Gambino crime family to kill Jeanette Smith. Now, whether he did or he didn't on behalf of them, it was never really proven. The thought was, though, and in conversations Hernandez had in prison with other people, it was through the fact that she was hooking up with other people and he thought it was his girlfriend. Whether or not the Gambinos had him do this, we'll never really know. I'm not going to make a guess on whether that happened or not. But ultimately, this is what would prove costly to not only Tony Pep, but Fred Massaro. Ultimately, the feds would jam up all three of these people. Hernandez eventually would get life in prison for killing Jeanette Smith. I'm not going to go into the particulars of the death, but it was particularly grisly. There was sexual assaults involved, and he threw her into the Everglades and things of that nature. Massaro would end up being found guilty as well. He would get life in prison. Tony Pep would actually end up being found guilty and get 8 years. Now, in 2001, Tony Pep would do something that a lot of people would be considered a rat move. He would actually go to the FBI and sign paperwork, and there is paperwork out there. He would basically sign admitting to the fact that he was part of the mafia. The United States Court for the Southern District of Florida would present him with a case number, United States of America, against Tony Pep. And he would agree in a stipulation that according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the USA, and defendant Anthony Trentacosta, it would stipulate and agree that the defendant is a member of the Gambino crime family and has been a member since the late 1980s. Now, the district attorneys would sign, and there in black and white is the signed affidavit of Tony Pep, basically admitting that he is in the member, he was in the mob. Now, obviously, that is a rat move. Admitting to the fact there's his name down at the bottom there, that is a rat move, okay? Admitting to being a part of the FBI or being a part of the mafia. So, that is something that's very interesting. You don't see that much. And according to an FBI agent called George Gabriel, he would say, quote, "It's a slap in the face of Peter Gotti and a challenge to the entire Gambino crime family. You never admit that you're part of anything." Another law enforcement official, according to Jerry Capisci, would put it more succinctly, saying Tony Pep basically told Peter, John, and all the rest to go fuck themselves. They have to kill him or become a laughingstock. They lost a lot of respect during Gotti's reign. If that goes unpunished, they became a joke. Now, they didn't end up killing Tony Pep. Tony Pep would actually die in federal prison in 2005 during his 8-year sentence. So during his life, there was a lot of interesting things that would arise. He would ultimately be a huge earner for the family. He made a lot of money through real estate, through his gas scheme and all that stuff. But ultimately, him getting involved with violent crime, and maybe he wasn't even involved, but due to the RICO Act, it all went up to him. He was the capo regime down in Florida, and his people got jammed up through this guy, Ariel Hernandez. So ultimately, he didn't go to jail for life, but it ended up being a death sentence because Tony Pep died in federal prison. As always, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did enjoy it, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. I'll continue kind of the look into the Gambino crime family. If you have a member you want me to take a look at, please let me know. I'm going to do this in other families as well. If you want longer form biographies of other high-end mob people, check out my podcast down at the bottom, The Sitdown, a Mafia History podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Have a great day.